Welcome, everyone, to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, and it is time for a preview of the final Masters 1000 of the year, 2024 Rolex Paris Masters in Bercy. Also the only indoor hardcourt Masters 1000 of the season. It has already begun. I'm recording this after day one. Unfortunately, got a little bit backed up. I apologize for that. Two things happened. Not only did I get extremely busy and I had to do the mailbag and then I had to do Monday Match Analysis, then I had some other stuff pop up in the life. But also, I didn't realize until Saturday that this was a 1 week Masters, because it's become such a rarity, and they've made more and more of these things. The 12-day Masters 1000s, which is always a Wednesday start, and the draw usually comes out on Sunday or Monday. So something, in my head when I was scheduling this all out, I kind of thought it was a 12-day, even though I knew it. I should have known it was a 1 week Masters, because I'm literally commentating in the Mets and Belgrade 250 next week. But I didn't put two and two together. So enough of that. I will go through the day one results. But I also kind of want to talk about this event in general. There are a couple things that I looked at. First of all, the other day, I was thinking about how many kind of surprising Masters 1000 champions there have been recently. And I think the way to measure that is unseeded, right? If there's an unseeded champion, that's surprising, especially because a lot of these Masters 1000s now have 32 seats, which goes to what I was just talking about with the 2 week format. But I just want to throw this stat out here because it does relate to Paris. In a 14-year span, from 2008 to 2021, there was one unseeded Masters 1000 male champion, which was Karen Khachanov at the 2018 Paris Masters. In the last 3 years, there have been four. Carreño Busta, Coric, Runa, and Popyrin. So again, we went 14 years and it happened once. And then in the next 3 years, it happened 4 times that there was an unseeded Masters champion. When it comes to Paris itself, it has been fairly common that a player might win the Paris Masters, and that goes on to be their only 1000 title. Now, for some of these guys, they still have time to win another, some of them more than others. But if you just go since 2010, it was Soderling's only Masters 1000. It was Ferrer's only Masters 1000. It was Sock's only 1000. That was 2017. Khachanov hasn't won a Masters since. And Runa in 2022 hasn't won a Masters since. Obviously, tons of time for him. 4 players since 2010 who have won Paris haven't won another. So it tends to just open itself up for some more left field results. I think that's fair to say. Paris tends to do that. Last 3 years tends to happen. Just want to throw that out there. Conditions, low bounce, slow, no elements. So, you get that indoor hardcourt benefit for the clean ball strikers and the players who like to be very, very clinical offensively. They can obviously benefit from the roof, but it's also not fast, never has been fast. So it will get more physical, and sometimes rallies will drag out a little bit more, and serves won't dominate quite as much as they normally would on an indoor hardcourt. All right, day one results. First of all, Felix Auger-Aliassime has withdrawn, back injury. So he did not end up playing Ben Shelton as was scheduled. Talon Griekspoor won in straights over Luciano Dartari. Arthur Rinderknecht prevailed over Tomas Machac after Machac retired with an Achilles injury. That's a pretty big deal. Machac, when he's been healthy, has been killer in the last 6 or so weeks. He actually just broke into the top 10 in ELO, which I saw, which is pretty wild. So that's notable. I feel like most of Mahac's setbacks in recent memory have been physical injuries, durability. So goes along with that. French crowd will be happy that Rinderknecht moves through. Jordan Thompson beat Pedro Martinez in straight sets. Not a huge shock there. Francisco Cerundolo beat Contan Alice. Alice, maybe the biggest serve outside the top. Is he outside the top 100? No, he's 90 in the world right now. Okay, but you get my point. One of the biggest serves in that range down there. Tomas Martin Echeverry beat Zheng Zhizhen 6-3, 7-6. I haven't looked at the stats. I feel like Zheng is in a rough patch right now. Battle between two qualifiers. Marcos Giron beat Jerry Shang in 2 tiebreaks. Big win for Marcos. Hugo Humbert beat Brandon Nakashima. Nakashima has been a top 20 killer in the second half of this season. He has racked up the top 20 wins. Hugo Humbert gets through him 6-4 in the third. It was a great match. I saw some of it. Misha Kecmanovic beat Sebastian Baez. It was tough, 7-5 in the third. Bublik beat Fanini, 5-5. Tsitsipas dropped the first set against Roberto Carballes Baena, rallied to win in 3. Nicholas Jarry, who finally is starting to look more like himself in the last couple weeks, I should say. He beat Lorenzo Sonigo, 7-6, 6-3. Alejandro De Pilo, he beat Nuno Borges. That was 6-3 in the third. De Pilo is also seemingly breaking out of a little bit of a rough patch here. Manarino, big result, last match of the day. Manarino has had a horrendous season since making the 4th round of the Australian Open, at least. There have been more wins sprinkled in since the U.S. Open, but nothing massive until this. He beats Tommy Paul 6-3, 7-5. That's his first top 20 win since beating Ben Shelton way back at the Australian Open in the 3rd round. So those are the results. And I felt the need to go over them because it will kind of orient ourselves before we get into the quarter-by-quarter preview, which we will do now. Quarterfinal, dark horse, upset alert, early popcorn, as always. Jannik Sinner's quarter to begin. My dark horse is Jack Draper. My upset alert is Taylor Fritz. My early popcorn match is Rune versus Arnaldi in the first round. Jack Draper played awesome last week in Vienna, and I think the conditions in Vienna are quite similar to Paris. It's another slow hard court. Jack was firing on all cylinders in every aspect of his game. Like I thought the serve was on the money. I thought the backhand was on point as it usually is. The forehand was what I kind of focused on because I thought, in Monday Match Analysis, because I thought it just really controlled the match in that final against Karen Khachanov. But the test here is physical. Can you go all the way and come back the next week and basically play back-to-back weeks without a break? And the physical component is the part that Jack knows is kind of his biggest challenge. But he came in well-rested. He came into Vienna well-rested. He's put in the work, and, we've seen that leap all year long from him. If he can hold up physically, yes, it's, Jiří Lehečka in the first round and Taylor Fritz in the second round. But I think on a slow indoor hardcourt, I feel like there's nothing better for Jack than that. And he's hot, and he's confident, and he's going to look to finish the year strong here. So he's my dark horse. I think the capability for him is really high. And Taylor Fritz is going to be on upset alert here because he has to face the winner of Draper and Lehečka. And those are two guys, particularly Draper, but I think Lehečka to a certain extent as well, with a match win under their belt. They come into that, a second round encounter against Fritz, and they both have the capability to play a top 10 level for one best-of-3 set match and really take it to Fritz and make him defend a lot. So I could see Taylor being vulnerable in that particular spot, and I didn't think there were a ton of good options for upset alert outside of that. Sinner's probably going to play Shelton. Jannik has beaten Shelton 4 straight. Rune is 8-1 here. His record His only loss is 6-4 in the third against Djokovic, so tremendous resume for Holger here at the Paris Masters. De Minaur has not looked right. I don't think his movement is there, and I respect the effort. He's trying to make a push for the ATP Finals, but I don't think he's looked right. I still think he gets through this draw because it's kind of a soft draw for De Minaur. Early popcorn, Rune versus Arnaldi, round one. Arnaldi, he's still unseeded. He finds himself in a lot of early popcorns for me all year long, because he has a ton of talent with his movement and his shot making, and he tries a lot of different things out on the court. You see net rushing. You see a lot of dynamic kind of north-south movement, willing to defend. So it's always fun. And Holger, being the wild card that he is, I think that could be a very interesting match. My quarterfinal prediction here: Sinner defeats Fritz. Taylor, this is what I predicted in the final of Shanghai, and Taylor lost to Novak, so that didn't end up happening. But I do think chances are Taylor gets through that upset alert. I know people get confused here, right? People get confused when I have the upset alert in the quarterfinal. The reality is, of all the seeds, I think Fritz is most likely to lose early. But I still think, among all the possibilities, I suspect he makes the quarterfinals. So I know those two things can be hard to square, but square them. All right, let's move on to Alexander Zverev's quarter. He is the number 3 seed. Dark horse Arthur Fils, upset alert, Alexander Zverev, early popcorn, none. Fils has made a lot of noise indoors, and he was actually asked on Second Serve, the show on T2, recently, what's your favorite surface? Because there's been some debate about what Fis's best conditions are. Because there's been a lot of indoor hardcourt success, then there's been a lot of clay success. And Fils said clay, but he has made a lot of runs, deep runs, this time of year, February. Like, these indoor hardcourt seasons have been really good for Fils. He's been playing really well as of late. And look, Paris Masters, like, you look at motivation as, a big deal at this event. Last of the year, vacations are booked, bodies are hurting, psyches are tired. Fils has two things in his favor. He's a young guy with a ton of energy who really loves to compete, and he's playing in Paris. So Fils is going to look at this as one of the biggest events of his season. And most guys, I know it's a Masters 1000 and there's a lot on the line, but especially in the first round and the second round, you're going to catch some guys sleepwalking out here. So I think Fils has that working to his advantage. Let me just look at the draw. He opens up with Marin Cilic in the first round. Then he gets either Musetti or Struff. Man, Fils Musetti sounds like a lot of fun. Upset alert is Alexander Zverev. He has made the final here before. He serves reliably indoors because he serves reliably outdoors. So with the roof, that's just amplified. And it's slow enough, the conditions where he can play his style, but the low bounce is not something that he enjoys. And he hasn't looked great since the Olympics, when he started to not feel so well physically, and I think fatigue set in, and there just hasn't been a lot of spark there, and I've kind of gotten off the Zverev train, and I've been mostly kind of correct to do so. Now, he plays Talon Griekspoor in the first round, and that's another reason why I'm putting him on upset alert, because Griekspoor is a player who Zverev hasn't really been able to create any separation from the last two times they've played. It was a 5th set tiebreak at Roland Garros, and it was a 3rd set tiebreak in Shanghai. Griekspoor does have a win over Zverev. It was last year in Rotterdam, indoor hard. It's the only time they've played it on indoor hard. If you look at their head-to-head, even in the more straightforward Zverev wins, there have usually been tie breaks. So, Griekspoor is just a guy, I think he's probably, like, it's probably excruciating for Talon that he didn't win either of his matches against Zverev so far. Now he has a chance to come at him again, and he knows he can be there with Sasha because he's done it before many times, and it's just a matter of figuring out a way to close. So, Zverev Greek Sport, it's been close all year. In these conditions, I'd expect it to be close again. I could not find an early popcorn match in this quarter, but my quarterfinal prediction is going to be Fils defeats Tsitsipas. I'll start with Stefanos, who, I'll say this, I picked it before the Roberto Carballes Baena match. Do I love that he didn't win that in straights? Not really, but I'm going to stick with Tsitsipas here. I do think these conditions are good for him and that he can make a quarterfinal here because he tends to, like, indoor hard court, it's been better than outdoor hard court throughout his entire career, first of all. And I just think it's because he finds the center of the strings more often. The backhand comes off cleaner. And the precision game with the serve and the first forehand gets even better. Like, so much of what Tsitsipas does, and yes, he's got decent pace on the serve and he's got good pace on the forehand. So much of what he does, though, is like he'll just really play so tight to the sidelines, especially on the forehand. The precision is like incredible. He drops dimes all day, and he does that indoors, a lot better. Plus, this court doesn't have the speed where he, look, the return, it's never awesome, but sometimes on a fast court against a great server, Steph is just like really lost. And I think these conditions are slow enough where he can catch up with the ball a little bit easier. And that's why I'm kind of high on Tsitsipas coming into this week. I haven't been in a while, but I think things kind of line up for him pretty nicely here. And but Fils, Fils is going to be my pick to make the semifinal for all the reasons I mentioned. I've liked what I've seen from him recently. Fils, of course, beat Tsitsipas in the quarterfinals last week in Basel. That was scoreline 7-6, 6-3. And then a couple weeks prior to that, he won Tokyo. He beat Hugo Humbert, who, when he gets first of all, he had never lost a final, Humbert. He is, really good on actually, I don't think Tokyo is that fast a hard court. I was about to call it a quick hard court, but that would have been disingenuous. But how about the run by Fils in Tokyo? He beat Fritz, he beat Berrettini, he beat Shelton, he beat Runa. I think he's playing a lot steadier. There's more calmness from Fils. I don't think he's kind of swinging out of his shoes as often on his forehand. He's constructing points better. He's using his physicality. Yeah, I think he's in a good spot. And he's the kind of player who I feel like excels at the Paris Masters all the time. He's young, he's confident, he's energetic. I think that goes a long way here. All right, Daniil Medvedev is the number 3 seed. He's got Dimitrov, Hurkacz, and Francis Tiafoe in his quarter. My dark horse here is Giovanni Pecci-Perricard. My upset alert is everyone except Dimitrov. And early popcorn is going to be Medvedev versus the winner of Alexei Popyrin and Matteo Berrettini. Look, I know I made Draper dark horse. Now I'm making Pecci-Perricard my dark horse. I don't normally do this. Like, I don't usually love a player coming off of a title. We've seen time and time again, they often don't perform the next week. But Draper, I just think, is good enough that he should be able to do it. And I think he's just by far the most dangerous among the unseeded players because I thought he looked like a top 10 player last week. Pecci-Perricard's a bit of a different story. I think he's got an interesting first round matchup in Francis Tiafoe. Followers of the channel will know why. I've documented throughout my coverage of Tiafoe that he gets aced a ton. He gets aced a lot, and now he's facing the current ace king. He hits more aces than anybody else, including Hurkacz, on the tour. That's an interesting matchup right there, right? He does not play a physical style. His matches don't get very physical. So I don't think he's going to come into Paris being like, oh, I'm so sore in the legs. I don't really see that. Right now, obviously, he's just feeling really confident on serve. And to me, it's almost like we've seen Berrettini go on some of these runs on grass courts when he gets hot with the serve, and he can kind of go, like we saw him go 3 weeks in a row one time, like title, and his legs didn't fall off because it wasn't physical, because he was just serving everybody off the court. And I'm not saying Pechi Perikar is going to win the Paris Masters, but I'm not really concerned about the physicality, and I think the Tiafoe matchup opens up some opportunities. And then you have the France thing, right? So he's another guy. He's not just going to be like, okay, I'm tired, I just want a title, so let me just like sleepwalk through this next tournament. No, this next tournament is Paris Masters, and he's French, so there's going to be some intensity there and some focus. All right, upset alert is everyone but Dimitrov. Hubert Hurkacz has been injured. He plays Alex Mickelson. Frances Tiafoe, we discussed. Daniil Medvedev, which is also my popcorn, plays the winner of Berrettini-Popyrin. Okay, both top 30 level players in their own right. And I think this court is kind of too slow for Medvedev based on how he's been playing. And I know that there's been success at this event in the past for Daniil. I'm actually going to pull up his record now because I'm curious about the specifics. But Daniil recently has had a big problem off the ground getting the ball through the court. And of course, he's also had a big problem getting his serve through the court. But that forehand just isn't firing as much as you would need it to for him to have success on a slow court surface. Now, Popyrin and Berrettini, in fairness, they're not really the guys to bother Daniil with defense. It's not going to be like, they're just going to play like walls and frustrate Medvedev with court coverage. But still, I don't love these conditions for Medvedev. He's lost in the first round back-to-back years here, but the losses were to Dimitrov last year and De Minaur the year before. De Minaur, 2022 De Minaur, though, not, it's kind of exactly what I'm saying. That's a guy who's going to be fast, quick around the court, make it difficult for Medvedev to get the ball through. Now, of course, the year before that, he was in the final against Novak. That was the year that Djokovic just served and volleyed Medvedev, really the first guy to do it. And the year before that, 2020, Medvedev actually won the title. And he beat, a lot of really big servers along the way. He beat Raonic in the semis, and he beat Zverev in the final. But, of course, he hadn't, won it since because Medvedev doesn't like to win the same tournament twice. So there's also that. All right. Quarterfinal here is going to be Grigor Dimitrov versus Karen Khachanov. As far as that matchup specifically, I will note that Dimitrov is lifetime 4-0 against Khachanov, and historically, Karen has just had a ton of trouble trying to survive the serve +1 of Dimitrov. And also, Grigor kind of takes away a lot of what Khachanov does on the two-hander, and, how he likes to kind of grab control of rallies with that particular shot a little bit more than his forehand, because Dimitrov can kind of hit the slice to really take away Khachanov's power game off of that two-hander. So 4-0 for Dimitrov in the head-to-head specifically. And I've loved the hard court tennis that Grigor has played the last 2 years. There have been some health issues recently and some, fitness blips here and there in the second half of this season. But other than that, he has played really well. And I just like in still conditions with no elements, the way he's hitting his first serve and the way he's hitting that first forehand. I think he is going to be blowing a lot of people off the court. And then, of course, in return games, the speed of the court also gives him the ability to make some plays with his athleticism. And the low bounciness helps him on the slice. And Grigor's got a terrific draw. His highest seed is Hubert Hurkacz. Hurkacz is coming off of injury, and he can't beat Dimitrov. He's 0-6 against Grigor. So that's ideal. He's got Echeverry in the second round. That's pretty comfortable. A guy who just can't really hurt him off of the backhand, and he's going to play solid and steady. But yeah, that's good for Grigor. Then on the other side, Medvedev is someone who Dimitrov beat on this court last year, if Medvedev is the quarterfinalist. But I think it's going to be Khachanov, who he's 4-0 against. So I'm pretty into that pick, and I think Dimitrov makes the semis here. Coming in with some confidence on that one. All right, Alcaraz's quarter. Top seeds are Ruud, Paul, and Humbert. Tommy Paul lost today, so you can kind of scratch him off of that list. My dark horse is Marcos Giron. My upset alert is Casper Ruud. My early popcorn, I wrote Alcaraz Wimbledon. I will explain. Let's start with Giron. Playing much more offensively this year, and he's gone on some runs. It hasn't been a crazy awesome year, but indoor hard court, that's Giron's best conditions, with his very, 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 very flat forehand that he is increasingly using as a weapon instead of relying on his fitness, which is totally top notch. Okay. He's got great movement and he never gets tired of running, but Giron is just starting to dominate a little bit more with that forehand recently, and it has served him well. Good win in a couple of tiebreaks against Jerry Shang, and I think he could be someone to watch here. Upset alert, Casper Ruud. Casper will go up against Jordan Thompson in the second round. Thompson has always played Ruud tight. They've, let me see what the head-to-head is. I believe it's something like 3-3. It is. It's 3-3. Thompson won the last meeting in Tokyo. He also won earlier this year on a hard court in Los Cabos. I've watched some of those matches. I watched the final in Los Cabos, and Thompson's game plan was pretty simple. He is really good at taking the ball early and coming forward, and he will get in on Ruud's backhand, and he will force Casper to come up with passing shots off of that wing. I know that sounds like a very easy thing to do, but not many execute it as well as Jordan Thompson, who, by the way, is also serving exceptionally well this year, and it's been a huge boost for his game. And Casper's struggled to get anything going, and it seems like he's ready for the offseason. And he's someone, confidence-wise, he's ebbed and flowed a lot in the last 2 years, huh? And this feels like an ebb, doesn't it? Early popcorn is Alcaraz Wimbledon. It just feels like, I was looking at his draw, right? And I see Nicholas Jarry in his opening match, who even before he won today, I thought he'd win. So I was looking at it as, okay, it's going to be Jarry. Nico does have a win over Alcaraz on clay. That was in South America. But also last year at Wimbledon, they played a really good match. Jarry had Alcaraz very uncomfortable, especially the way he was just attacking Carlos's serve. And then the next match probably would be Hugo Humbert for Alcaraz. Humbert played really well against Carlos at Wimbledon this year and had all the momentum until late in the fourth set. It looked like it was probably going 5, and Alcaraz just went on a crazy run of incredible tennis for 10 minutes to kind of swipe the match away and seal the deal. So that's my early popcorn. It's the first 2 matches for Alcaraz, probably guys with a lot of offensive skill and capability, which we know is really the only way to beat Alcaraz. And they've done it in the past. They've played Alcaraz tight. My quarterfinal here was Alcaraz defeats Paul. That's what it was. That's what's on the slide. Since Paul lost to Adrian Manarino, I will amend that, and I will say Carlos Alcaraz defeats Jordan Thompson, who out of all these guys, I basically said I think he'll beat Casper Ruud, and I'm not going to, at this point, continue to back, a Manarino or a Richard Gasquet or a Zizou Bergs, who comes through as a lucky loser. And Bergs is actually a really great shot maker on an indoor hard court. But yeah, I mean, Thompson on hard court has been by far the best player all year long out of those guys. Ultimately, it'd be a nice quarterfinal for Alcaraz, in my opinion. That brings us to the final weekend, which will be revealed in 3, 2, 1. Sinner defeats Fils, Alcaraz defeats Dimitrov, and Sinner defeats Alcaraz. I know I started this by saying Paris-Bercy, funky stuff can happen, but at the end of the day, I just think the way Sinner and Alcaraz have been playing, they don't appear to be very vulnerable. And the gap between them and everybody else has never, ever looked larger. Now, neither of them have had much success at this particular event. Sinner, there's not much of a sample size whatsoever. I mean, he is 1-2 lifetime in Paris. I mentioned last year he won one match, finished at 3 a.m., and then withdrew. Alcaraz, he actually, the first time they played was in Paris in 2022. But there's been a lot of upset defeats for Alcaraz here. He lost to Safulin last year. He had that rough loss against Hugo Gaston when he had a massive lead. That was in 2022. And then he got hurt here against Rune. So I don't think Alcaraz has ever left Paris-Bercy feeling good about himself in his career in 3 appearances. So ultimately, I just wanted to throw that out there. Didn't really factor into my decision-making. I will say this. I've been rolling with Jannik Sinner at these big hardcourt events because he's been winning the big hardcourt events. He won the 2 hardcourt majors. He has won 3 out of the last 4 hardcourt masters. It's tough to deny that. You have to have a good reason to go against that. And one reason might be, all right, like Alcaraz has been, he's been a different guy post-U.S. Open this year, a much better guy post-U.S. Open this year than what we've seen in the past, and he's played Sinner really well all year. But I just find that falls a little bit flat when you look at the indoors factor. This is a really tight head-to-head. I'm often going to go with conditions when it comes to a head-to-head this competitive and this tight. And on paper, the roof overhead helps Jannik. On paper, it's very clear. I mean, Sinner, indoor hardcourt, 6 titles. Alcaraz, 0 titles on indoor hardcourt. Pretty big difference there, huh? Jannik to beat Alcaraz, he's got to create some separation in the serve-return dynamic. I think the roof helps him do that a little bit. And then mentally, this is not as solid for me, but I still think Sinner's probably playing with a little more of a chip on his shoulder compared to Alcaraz just because of the head-to-head, which I don't think an exhibition win is going to eliminate that chip on the shoulder, although it probably helps confidence a little bit. And in that way, it's almost a win-win for Sinner in this spot mentally. So that is my pick. I am going to be back on Friday and Saturday with post-match analysis. And then, of course, the customary super deep dive Monday match analysis for the final, the second to last big final of the year. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.